Good evening, everybody. It's 9:30 p.m. on a Monday on the East Coast, 6:30 p.m. on the West Coast. It must mean it's time for your weekly Calamity Jane live stream. James, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing all right, but pre to our going live tonight, Eric was kind of giving me a status update of what's going on with him. So I don't know. It'd be silly for me to go, "How are you doing?" when I know how you're doing.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so I mean, I'll say it, but we might as well go into it a little bit. I mean,
yeah. I did something to myself, and I've got persistent dizziness and vertigo, and it is a massive life disruption right now.
yeah,
So I'm trying to schedule appointments with doctors and whatnot, but no one really has any appointments available, and so I'm just kind of living with being dizzy and having vertigo all the time. It's
yeah.
I don't know what's going on, but it's yeah, it's not fun, man. It's really not fun.
Yeah, it's I mean, Eric, I don't know if I told you this before too, but my dad suffers from vertigo. I mean, it's just a chronic thing.
Yeah,
But I think it has to, it's kind of more tied to maybe his sugar intake and stuff like that as he's older now and stuff like that. But we still never found a reason for it. But like I've seen it with other loved ones where they're dealing with it and it's just awful. Like it's like really feel bad for you. I just wish there was some magic Zoom ray I could send over to you to help you out with this.
yeah, yeah. I
It
don't know.
sounds, and then the first thing, well, obviously, the culprit from what you're telling me is you had COVID a couple of weeks ago, and then but we don't know. There's no data or anything to say this, but maybe it's an after effect of
Yeah, maybe it
of
is.
COVID.
It's
Just
I don't know. I mean, the only yeah, I mean, COVID was the only variable. I mean, I guess I got COVID, got over that. My masseuse gave me like a chest and upper like neck massage to help clear out my sinuses and stuff. And I was fine after that. And then I went to exercise, and about 2/3 of the way through the exercise, the dizziness started, and that was last Wednesday, and it hasn't stopped since.
so the exercise triggered it, but it's almost like it's like lying dormant, waiting to pounce on you or something, kind of thing.
Something
Who
that's kind of
knows?
what it feels like. Yeah, I don't know.
The other thing is like if you were sick and like and again we're not doctors on our show, but
No, not at
like if
all.
you're sick and you're battling something and you have sinus problems and so you have mucus and all that stuff kind of going all through your head, maybe something settled in there and now it's just angry at you
Yeah,
and now it's just infected and now you just got to wait to do get confirmation to solve it, you know what I
yeah,
mean? Now
yeah.
you're stuck in the waiting game
No,
because
just
you're
yeah. There's nothing I can do at this point. Just wait for that
yeah.
to the doctor's appointment and see if they can. I don't know. Make any sort of heads or tails about what's going on. Quite frankly. But yeah, I mean, I called an ENT, and for new patients, it was like a month and a half long wait. An ear,
Yeah.
nose, throat doctor, and that was the one that they referred me to. So, yeah, it's just I don't know, man. It's weird. This is literally nothing that I've ever experienced in my entire life. So
Yeah, it's almost like I kind of want to just hang out with you and go on message boards for COVID, sufferers and
I mean,
see if they've all
yeah,
suffered the same thing, like
yeah,
some
I
people out
know.
there.
So I've not heard that as a consequence of COVID. It's not to say
Okay.
that it's not. I mean,
Hmm.
everything is like COVID is the virus now. Like, I mean, it's just like, so who knows? But I,
Yeah. Hmm.
but
Well,
in any case,
yeah.
my bizarre medical problems notwithstanding, what are we working on tonight?
Okay, I'll share my screen. Maybe I could, hopefully this could distract you a little bit from
Yeah.
your stuff, and we will. It's not getting too exciting here. I'm back to doing mouth packs, but I actually sat down and started just drawing them myself a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So if I cycle through, you'll see that I have the mouth packs kind of built out now to
Oh,
where I have
cool.
here. So yeah, I was struggling last week with it, but yeah, I'm in a good spot now. So this week I'll just keep going and I'll finish to the very end.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see here down here where my mouse is.
Mm-hmm.
This is the actual 3/4 front. So I'm just using that as my guide to what I need to do for the drawing, the actual drawing of Planet Three Borders back, which mouth pack I'm on which frame. So I'll keep doing that, and we'll keep going, and just then see if we can kind of not trigger your dizziness tonight.
Yeah.
a little bit.
How? So what was your process? Take me through how you kind of cracked this nut.
It's just, sometimes you just got to keep drawing and you got to keep drawing until you get to a good spot. You saw these, here, I'll just back up a little bit. But, like I actually was doing a lot of these doodles, like just, over and over again. Like what makes it look right in line work?
Mm-hmm.
Like when I'm drawing, like how does a mouth look? That's awful. I haven't practiced that. But, yeah, like, how does the mouth look from behind? If I was to do it, like if I was to draw it, not use shape, because like
Mm-hmm.
with Calamity, it's all shapes. But when I want to draw, I want to use lines. So I just did a lot of practice with line drawing first, and kept practicing until it felt good. And I went,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that's kind of what I want. Now I got to bring it to shape and just ignore my line drawings. And I got to that point once I broke through with the first one and the second. But then it's like, yeah, okay, now I'm good. Now I can cruise. And then, as you can see, I started just cruising along, and I'm in a good spot now. Now I'm not gonna be struggling with this one anymore. No more weeks of this. We could probably get this wrapped up pretty much tonight for this back view. And I'm gonna try to do. And then if you see here on this front, this is where the happy mouse will be for her, the happy version of her
Okay.
mouth will live over here, and I'll do that eventually. Maybe I'll get to that tonight. I don't know, but the priority was to do this because she's more in a. This is the need that we need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that was kind of the journey a little bit. But sometimes you just gotta sit down and swear at your screen for an hour or two before you
Yeah.
actually get someplace. I'm sure the same with writing too. When you're writing something out, there's so many ways to go with the English language. You could, sometimes there's like one word to say one thing, but I don't know. Really, it's the same thing. You're interchanging stuff and trying to figure out a good rhythm, and you know, I would imagine it's the same way.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, sometimes you'll like beat your head up against a scene or even just a paragraph, and no matter how you write it down, it just doesn't feel right. The words aren't coming, or you're not finding the arc of the scene. You don't have an ending, or you have an idea for an ending, but you don't know how to get there. I mean, the list is endless, right? For the other
Yeah.
ways. And honestly, a lot of times what I'll do, especially in something like a screenplay where it's pretty, you know, quantized, where everything exists in kind of a discrete scene, I will table one scene and I'll move on
Hmm.
to another one. Um, that I think I have a better chance of sort of getting some traction on. And then, a lot of times it'll shake things loose and you can come
Hmm.
back to it. It's like, oh, I know how to get there because I wrote this other scene later on, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
It's a little bit harder when I'm working in short stories because, again, short stories are, and especially short stories because generally speaking, they don't have chapters, they don't have breaks, right? Whereas books
Hmm.
also have sort of natural break points, although chapters are typically much longer than a scene in a screenplay. But short stories, because they tend to be wholly self-contained tales, they don't have a lot of chapters. There's not a lot of um, change in scenery or change in character. It's usually, generally speaking, in my experience, it's one perspective, one objective, one conflict. It's a very focused kind of tale, right?
Hmm.
And so when you're writing those, I will, when I write a short story, I will, generally speaking, have an idea for a story I want to tell, or some sort of axe I want to grind, or if I'm lucky, I'll have at least some skeleton of a story structure that I want to explore. Other times it's just an impression.
Hmm.
I have this feeling of I want to talk about being haunted or something, right?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
and so for me with short stories, much more so than when I'm writing longer pieces, I tend to just jump in head first and improv it. I mean, improv is a thing that I do, and just see where it takes me. And usually that works. Usually, when I can find the character's voice, when I can find who the character is, they tend to take over. And
Hmm.
as long as I follow my instincts with what's going on, I can usually get through it. But every once in a while, you'll find yourself writing yourself. You'll find that you will write yourself into a corner, and you're like, oh shit. uh, now what, right? And you have to
Mm-hmm.
back
Mm-hmm.
up and you have to unravel a little bit. In those instances, I will sometimes get an idea for an ending, right? Like just even if it's just the last sentence. Like I
Wait,
know,
you're saying you'll come up with an ending because you are in a corner?
yeah, I will.
So
I'll be
like
in a corner and I'm like, okay, well, where was I going with this? What was the point? How did I walk
so
down
it's
this
like a
path?
so it's like it's like a survival mechanism. Like, oh, I gotta survive this. I gotta find an out to find an exit, right?
Yeah, you're not totally wrong, right? Like I've written myself into a corner. How did I write? Why did I write myself into a corner? I was following my instincts. I was um, improving. I found the flow, and now my character's in the middle of a desert, and he has no idea why he's there, and he has no idea where he's going, and all of the objectives, all of the sort of motivation has gone out the window because I took a left turn off of a dusty road somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll just stop and think about it and go, well, what am I trying to do? What brought this character? And I'm just making stuff up right now, but what
Yeah,
brought this
sure.
character to this desert road, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in thinking about that, you kind of go through the process. Well, what is the character searching for? What is ultimately, because short story two is on it, like any story that you want the character to change over the course of the
Mm-hmm.
story or not, but not change for a meaningful reason, right?
Yeah.
Or
Mm-hmm.
change and come back to their original point again for a meaningful reason. But there has to be change involved over the course of the story. And so, okay, so he came out to the desert for a reason. What change is he either trying to avoid or trying to accomplish, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I'll go, okay, well, I know where I want the character to be at the end of the story. Uh, and I'll get an idea for like just the closing paragraph, just the little denouement, like the little stinger that you always put at the end of a short story, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then oftentimes when I know that, then I go, okay, well, here I am at point, M along the line, and here's point Z that I need to go to, and then all of a sudden, it'll sort of break the ice a little bit, and I can find that flow again and get the character back on track.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't always work, and sometimes I'll just abandon a story for a while. I've got, I don't know, 50 half-finished short stories somewhere on one of my drives here and there.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they don't get much farther than just like the idea, right? Just me taking down notes. Because a lot of times that's the way I'll start a short story. I'll have an idea, and I'll just start asking questions about what this idea is, and I'll just start writing notes. Who is the character? Why is this idea important? What is the best genre for this? What are some
Mm-hmm.
moments that would make sense over the course of the story? Who is the antagonist? If there isn't like a character that's an antagonist, then what is the conflict of the character, or what is the trial that the character is trying to overcome, right? And once I have that kind of very loose um, um, idea in mind, then I'll start writing. Every once in a while, um, a story will come to me whole cloth. I'll get the entire story in my head, beginning,
Mm-hmm.
middle, and end. And then the biggest challenge is just making my fingers move fast enough on the keyboard to
To
keep up
yeah,
with my
to keep up with
thoughts,
the
right?
keys. Yeah. So here, before we go forward, there's one thing I thought was interesting. You're talking about when you're kind of grouping this in with short stories, but I would assume it's the same with going longer form because you're saying how you would write something out, and if you're banging your head around it too much, then you'll leave it and you'll go away and you come back to it. But don't you do that with what longer stuff too?
Well, with screenplays, I tend to plot a lot more.
Oh,
So
okay.
short
You're doing more
stories,
skeletal. Yeah.
yeah, I build more of a skeleton for a screenplay.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
And I would do the same thing. I've never really attempted to write a novel, but if I did, I would do the same thing. Something as big as that. I mean, like I know that J.R.R. Tolkien is sort of famous for starting and restarting Lord of the Rings because he
Uh
didn't
huh.
really have a true outline. He kind of had an idea of what he wanted the story to be and where it wanted to go, but he sort of discovered it along the way, and it's one of the reasons I've heard, this might be apocryphal, that it takes so long for Frodo to get out of the Shire, right?
Oh man. Is that where he meets Tom Bombadil and
Yeah,
hangs out forever?
yeah,
I hated that section of the book. I just skipped ahead of it after a
yeah.
while. Such a
And
waste.
but then once they get to Rivendell, it's like Tolkien figured
Oh,
out. It's like,
yeah.
oh, I get it now, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So for me, I can improv my way through a short story because short stories are between 4,000 and 10,000 words, right?
Hmm.
Much over 10,000 words, and you're getting into novella length, right? And then from about 10,000 to 80,000, 80,000 is a short novel, and then anything above 80,000 is considered a novel, right?
Mm.
Fun facts for anybody out there, aspiring writers, for general best practices for story lengths. But
So before again, yeah,
yeah,
sorry, I'm gonna apologize because that's interesting because I just make the assumption because when I'm doing a sketch or something like that, usually I always start with a sketch no matter what,
mm-hmm,
if it's what it's so it's funny to listen to the process for writing, how you approach it because how I approach drawing, there's like your equivalent of like a couple of ideas to or a plot is just like me sketching something and then going far along. Just like what I did tonight. Like
right,
you saw me start and stop for the past 3 weeks, right, of doing this,
yeah,
and then I finally sat down and did it. But I did it through sketching, or if we just swap out the activity, writing is the same thing. But
mm-hmm,
it's interesting because for you, you're saying that you do a skeletal system or a plot or a sketch for your longer stuff. But then when you get to that short stuff, you just kind of just get it out, which is
yeah,
interesting because for me, I would just think, well, if I'm going to draw something smaller, I'm still going to draw a sketch first, kind of a thing. But I guess not. Sometimes, like, I'm not doing a sketch here on some of these mouth packs. I'm kind of doing final work as I do it. I'm just drawing it out,
yeah,
but I already have it in my head. So
right.
it's just interesting. I'm doing that as an aside because I'm listening to you. I'm like kind of
No, no, yeah.
interested how
I
you're
think
going
there's
on.
a
Sorry, I
lot
didn't
of.
want to take you off
Oh
track.
no, no, I agree with you. I think there's a lot of parallels in any creative endeavor, right?
Yeah.
And to be clear, like this is all speaking in rough drafts. I mean, I'll finish a short story, whatever its length ends up being, and it'll be awful because first drafts are always awful, right?
Hmm.
Um, so, I say that I kind of improv my way through a short story, but that's just draft one of like 14 drafts,
Uh
right?
huh.
You'll make it, and then you go back, and you're like, okay, well this drags here. This isn't actually really driving the narrative forward. This isn't really addressing sort of the underlying kind of metaphor that I'm striving for, because I like metaphor and symbolism a lot. So a
Hmm.
lot of my short stories, there's an underpinning. There's some sort of an emotion, generally speaking, is what I'm trying to capture, right?
Hmm.
The short story that I told you that sprung to me, whole cloth. First dates are the worst.
Hmm.
Is actually about a giant robot that destroys a city, but the
Oh,
whole thing
okay.
is sort of a exploration of a really bad first date that I had once, right?
So you're doing that with the backdrop of a robot attacking a city?
Yeah,
That's really
exactly.
fun. That
Yes.
sounds pretty fun.
So I called it first dates are the worst because I thought it was funny to be really open
Yeah,
about what axe I have to grind, but then the short story is about a robot destroying a city, right?
yeah, yeah. That's
Um,
hilarious.
but so that was one where I was just sitting in bed going, man, that was a really bad date. I really want to write about it. And I've got that poster of a robot destroying Seattle behind me.
Is it the Iron Giant?
Yeah,
Or no?
it's a poster that was commissioned by the city of Seattle to commemorate some anniversary of the Space Needle, and
Oh,
I
okay,
just
okay.
thought it was a cool poster. So when I was visiting the Space Needle with a friend of mine, the only time I ever went to the Space Needle is because he asked to go see it. Um,
Wow, that's fun. That's really hilarious.
yeah, I saw that poster and I loved it, and so I bought it, and I was just lying in bed reflecting on this crappy first date that I had, and I saw that poster, and like just the entire story came to me, beginning, middle, and
That's
end,
funny.
and then I was just like racing to my computer to write it all down before I forgot it.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
that doesn't happen very often. Um, but anyway, yeah. So short story, I'll finish the first mechanical draft, and it'll be like 14 or 15 drafts before it's at a point where it's really, really, truly worth reading. Right? I mean,
Hmm.
first drafts are never worth showing to anybody else. I usually won't show a draft of a short story until I'm on draft 3 or 4
Hmm.
to somebody.
So you've never had an experience where you've wrote something and then you never could get it back, and you're like, oh man, that first draft I had, I'll never, because I've had that happen to me where I've done a
Oh yeah.
drawing and I've erased it or lost it, whatever, and I'll never get it back. That's the energy of it. Something
No.
about the spontaneity of it, you know?
Yeah. No. I mercifully I always keep older drafts. So
Hmm.
if I murder a draft revision, then I can just go back to the previous versions. And I know like Dropbox and things has source control now, so I don't actually have to keep separate drafts of it. But it's always just easier to
Okay.
look at separate documents. So I always just manually version it. So first date to the worst version 4, first date to the and
Hmm.
just copy and paste the short story. But so and I'll do the same thing with longer stuff, right? Screenplays, the first draft I don't ever show to anybody, right? A
Hmm.
short or a feature length. First drafts are never worth showing to anybody unless someone has specifically requested that.
Hmm.
But with longer works, I can't improv my way through it as effectively. There's just too many pitfalls because you've got more plot lines you have to deal with. There's more characters that you're dealing with.
Hmm.
There's more threads that you have to resolve. And especially with in novels you can meander and drift
Yep.
and that's
Yeah.
fine a little bit. But with screenplays, every word, the best screenplay in the word, the best screenplays in the world, there's not a single wasted word, right?
Yeah.
And I think you could
Yeah.
say the same about novels. I mean, one of the hallmarks of The Great Gatsby, for instance, is it's got that same kind of cachet where it's like there's not a single wasted word in the entire novel. Like it is a perfectly scripted novel, right? But in any case, so I can't just sort of improv my way through screenplays. I have to, at the very least, plot it out, right?
Hmm.
There's a really, he's not like a particularly um, artist screenplay. He was a working screenplay writer. He sold a bunch of stuff, but only had like 2 or 3 of his scripts ever made into movies, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Blake Snyder, he did the Save the Cat um, screenplay writing books. And these are books about not writing the great American screenplay. These are books about how do you write a Hollywood screenplay, and he breaks it down beat by beat. On page 10, you need to have this. On page 30, you need to have this, etc.,
Oh,
etc.
so
Right?
he really dissects it to
Yeah.
where these are just pretty much these are the averages of where you need to be by page 10 kind of thing.
Yep.
Ah,
Exactly. So like the inciting incident needs to happen by here. Generally speaking, all your main characters need to be in by the first act. You're in 120 page screenplay. Act one is at about end of act one is about page 30. Midpoint of the movie is at page 60. Second act, third act turns on page 90, and then you've got your last page on page 120. And you've got, there's several key beats. You've got your opening scene, which has to do a ton of work
yeah.
to set the stage. You've got inciting incident, usually by about page 10. All characters have to be in by page 30. The first or the second act turn is the point at which we leave the world. And this is where we sort of get into the hero's journey side of it, which is a very Campbellian thing. But
Hmm.
in this, and this is something that comes from Robert McKee's screenplay book Story, which is also a phenomenal read for anybody who wants to learn about writing screenplays. But basically, you've got 3 acts. That's the traditional act structure. And it's very, in modern Hollywood, it's very Campbellian. So you've got your hero. It's the hero's journey loosely structured. You've got your hero, and
Hmm.
they're in the world of thesis. This is the world as they know it, right? They're going through their day. They get their job. They go to work. They come home. This is what they're used to, right?
Hmm.
And then you get the inciting incident, and that inciting incident triggers the turn into Act Two, right? So now we've left the world of the thesis and we've moved into the antithesis, which is now he's in this upside down kind of space where he's learning all these new things and it's very different to what he's used to, but he gets to play around with it. It's exciting, it's new, and this varies. Like you're not playing around. He's not having fun in a horror movie, but suffice it to say, right? horror movies are really, really easy. That's why so many people do horror movies. Is screenplays are
Mm-hmm.
very, very easy to write for horror movies,
Mm-hmm.
because they are so structured in that way. The thesis is the kids going on vacation to the summer camp, right? The
Mm-hmm.
inciting incident is Jason comes to the camp. So now we're in the world of the antithesis where the kids are fighting for their lives, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you get to the midpoint of the movie, and you'll either get a false positive or a false negative. What this means is this is a balance point to when we get to Act 3, right? So if you have a false
Mm-hmm.
positive, it means that the heroes or the protagonists have succeeded, and they think that they're okay, we're past the worst of it, now we're on our way back to normalcy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you could have a false negative where everything seems so dark, how can they possibly move on? Well, we don't have a choice, we have to keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so you move into the second half of Act 2 after the midpoint turn, and things start resolving, right? Characters start dying, conclusions are come to, conflicts begin to be resolved, and then you get to the third act turn, and this is the opposite. So if you have a false positive at the midpoint, you have a false negative at the third act turn, and that's the general structure. But you can also, again, if you do a false negative, you can have a false positive too. But basically, the traditional structure is you have a false positive at the midpoint and a false negative at the third act turn, which turns into the Dark Night of the Soul at the beginning of Act 3, where everything has collapsed, everything has fallen apart. The hero feels like they've lost. There's no hope of recovery. But then something happens, and they get the spark of intuition, and this is how the movie ends. Now we've gone into synthesis, right?
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
character has taken everything that they knew coming into the movie from the thesis, everything that they've learned through the antithesis portion of it, and now they're going to combine all that knowledge to become a better protagonist and resolve the conflict, right? So Jamie Lee Curtis destroying Michael Myers, right? Or what's her face's character from Night of the Living Dead, not Night of the Living Dead, Nightmare on Elm Street, who goes into the dreams and actually defeats Freddy, like using everything that she's learned up to this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got your climax, which is the final conflict resolution, and you've got a denouement, and then your movie's over, right? And that is the structure of a Hollywood screenplay in a nutshell, right? There's more details.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the very least, and Sid Field has a variation of this as well. I've read like every screenplay book in the world, by the way. And he's got a slightly different structure, but generally speaking, if you take Blake Snyder and Robert McKee and Sid Field's books, you have a really, really complete picture of how screenplays are written in Hollywood, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so at the very least, you want to make sure that you plot all of those key beats out, right? So you want to know when your inciting incident happens. You want to know what your first act turn is. You want to know what your midpoint turn is. You want to know what your Act 3 turn is, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to know what happens in the Dark Night of your soul. You want to know what your climax is, and you want to know what your denouement is. You want to kind of know what all of that is. And then once you're there, right, then you can, once I have that figured out, now sometimes I'll jump in, right? And I'll start experimenting, and I'll start kind of improvising, because it's not as big a deal to improvise when you've got a little bit more structure, right?
Mm-hmm.
You still have the challenge in that most movies have an A plot and a B plot. That's not always the case. Like John Wick, there's only the A story. There's no B story in John Wick, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But like in something like a Tarantino film, there's a B story, there's a C story, there's a D stinger, there's a, Tarantino's got like 12 different plots going on in all of his movies.
Mm-hmm.
And so it varies depending on what kind of movie you're writing. So if I'm writing something with like several storylines, then I'll take it the next step, right? Blake Snyder actually does, his method is you actually get like a cork board and you get index cards, and you actually write in just a skeletal outline form every single scene of your movie for every act.
Mm-hmm.
It's 10 to 12 cards per section. So he breaks it down into 4 sections. Act 1, Part 1, or Act 2, Part 1, Act 2, Part 2, and Act 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he gives himself 10 to 12 cards per section of the movie, and he details every single scene in the movie, whether it's an A storyline, a B storyline, a C stinger, what have you. And he goes through and he plots out every single scene. And then once he knows what every single scene is, then you can just go through it, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't make it trivial. Or writing a screenplay is, I mean, writing anything of any length is hard. Period.
Yeah. Sure.
So it's not like the work is done. You still have to then write the scenes. But I have written a couple of screenplays, being that specific, and it does help. But it also, I found that I tend to box myself in when I do that. I tend to make decisions that I'm afraid of walking back, because it's like, oh well, if I change this scene that I don't like anymore, then it
It's a
affects
domino
this
effect.
scene. Yeah,
The fear of the domino effect.
exactly. And so I end up hamstringing myself a little bit out of a fear of, yeah, like starting the
I think
dominoes to fumble.
I think I mean it's a really good strategy, especially to help you conquer the fear of at least getting the creative act started. But then, yeah, I could see the pitfall, which is then you get rigidity. You know, you
Yeah,
get too rigid about everything, and then you lose some of that loosey goosey kind of organic feel of the spontaneity of doing it.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's just tightrope you always have to do, no matter what it is, what creative process there is.
yeah.
Um,
I you know, I took a bunch of TV writing classes as
mhm,
well, and that's an interesting thing. So, TV writing is a little bit different if you're writing for a four camera comedy or a single camera comedy or a 1 hour drama, right? There's, um, old school TV sitcoms like four camera comedies. It's like a cold open and 2 acts.
mhm,
For a single camera comedy, it's a cold open and 3 acts, and sometimes there's even a tag at the end.
okay.
And then for 1 hour drama, it's generally speaking 4 to 5 acts plus a cold open, right? And so it's interesting that the structure for those are different than from film, understandably, because and now things are getting murky with television, especially with streaming, and no one has any hard lengths anymore. I mean, like,
Mhm,
Stranger Things season 4, every episode was an hour and 15 minutes long, which is just ridiculous, or
mhm.
longer. But then there's some shows where, like, you'll see one episode and it's like 45 minutes, and then the next episode is 32, and the next one's 55, and so they're not
Yeah, there's no rhyme or reason. Yeah.
right. So I get the sense, and I haven't read a modern, like, streaming, written for streaming screenplay, honestly. And
Uh-huh.
I wonder if they even do, because in traditional screenwriting or TV writing, teleplay writing format, you actually call out Act One, Act Two, Act Three,
Uh-huh.
and this goes back into the history of, they were writing specifically because they knew there were going to be commercials, and
Yep.
so you wrote each act with almost a little mini cliffhanger.
So that way, yeah, you have
That way,
something to
people would
pass.
come back, right,
Mm-hmm.
for the commercial break. And so when I was learning all of this was years ago now, and streaming was just a fever dream in the minds of computer scientists at this point. Everything was still on broadcast or cable, so there was always going to be broken up with commercials. And I suspect that this would still work, but the way we were taught to write is you start with 3 sentences: your beginning, your middle, and your end. That's it.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Then you take those 3 sentences, and I think the order is treatment. And you go into a treatment, and a treatment is 1 page.
Mm-hmm.
You take those 3 sentences and you turn it into a 1 page description of what the entire episode is for your show, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't. There's no dialogue at this point. It's just, and then he does this, and when he does this, this happens, and because of this, then this happens. Just 1 page to
Mm-hmm.
go through. And then once you get the treatment done, then you take that into an outline. And an outline is like a 10 to 15 page document that's written kind of like a short story, actually. And it even has like key dialogue call outs where you need it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're layering, right? The way that I was taught to write TV is you layer it. You go from very, very simple, very broad, and at each stage you get slightly more specific until once you're done with your outline, then you can take that into into like final draft or whatever, and write the script, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it, I think, has to do with the way writing rooms are structured.
Mm-hmm.
and needing to get approval from the showrunner to go like, yes, this is what we talked about. Okay, you can move on to the next phase, that kind of stuff. But I don't know for sure. And I don't even know if that's how it's done anymore. I mean, like, this is stuff I was learning back in 2006, 2007. So, I mean,
Well,
TV
it's a
is
plot.
so different now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, it has. Yeah, landscape has changed. Who knows? There is no rhyme or reason now. You're right.
No,
You know, like
no.
it's almost like even the last few episodes of Stranger Things, like there was no reason for them to just space it out at all. Like that they probably wanted to do that just to keep subscribers on the hook for a couple more
Yeah,
months.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if it's true or not, but
No,
it's
it's
just
I'm
it
certain
felt
that
so
it's true.
artificial.
Yeah, I'm certain that
Yeah,
that's
it
true.
felt there was no production need to pause it. It's
Yeah,
just no, we're just gonna hold off. It's
yeah.
like just roll your eyes a little bit. But I mean, I get it. You need every business is trying to make money, and you need to, and and they have a subscription based model, so you got to do it. I
Mm-hmm.
guess, but yeah, it's almost like is it going back? When you think about companies that are trying to put these pauses in, is it going backwards now? Like where you're almost releasing episodes weekly because Hulu does stuff weekly on some stuff. You don't
Mm-hmm.
get everything in one shot,
Mm-hmm.
and with their own exclusive stuff, but everything's done, everything's in the can, everything's shot. So I don't know. It's not just Netflix that's doing it.
No, they're going
So,
back. I mean, like Disney Plus, HBO Max,
hmm yeah,
um,
they all do it.
Paramount Plus, Amazon Prime. I mean, they usually will do weekly releases. Now, like Disney Plus and Amazon Prime will sometimes release like the first 3 episodes in
Yeah,
a batch.
and then after that, then they've got you, and then you come back every week. You tune in
Yeah.
every week. It's almost like back to network TV, like NBC, waiting for the next Seinfeld episode or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. I think what's great about what Netflix had the magic because they had everything. They got everything in one shot, and everybody could just binge it. But then now that the whole streaming um, landscape is maturing, now there's a lot more experimentation. Um,
Yeah.
for us,
Yeah.
for us as the viewers, it's kind of a bummer if we want to binge, but maybe
I don't
it's kind of
know.
what it
Yeah,
is.
I don't know that there's a real clear winner here. I know Paramount Plus might be the first victim. I read an article earlier this week that said in the month of June they didn't add a single new subscriber.
What?
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty.
So that's
Yeah,
not a good sign, right? I mean, you live and die based on your subscribers.
yeah. And then I wonder like their newest Star Trek offering was everything you could binge. I think maybe not. Maybe it was
No, that one came
released
out on a
weekly.
weekly basis as well.
Oh, it did.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow. So that didn't even help them.
Yeah, and it's a shame because Strange New Worlds is actually excellent. It's not next generation good, but
But it's
I,
still
yeah,
it's good.
I like it as much as I like Deep Space Nine, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's high praise.
Yeah.
Is it still being released every week?
Well, this first season's done, but yeah,
Okay.
it was on a weekly cadence. It's been already been renewed for season 3, I think.
Wow.
Like
That's cool.
they're working on season 2 right now, and I think it's been renewed through season 3.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah,
Mm. Yeah, well, I mean, you hope that more subscribers go to Paramount Plus to watch it,
yeah,
so they can still keep making stuff. That's the thing. It's at the end of the day, it's about they have to make you have to get paid to make content.
yeah.
So
So, I don't know. We'll
you know,
see. Well, we've been going for a while here, almost 40 minutes. Sorry, I feel like I've like gone over all of this writing stuff before. So if you go through the archives, this may be a bit of a repeat for anybody who's watching. But
I don't know. I don't know. We have maybe we have. I think we touched on it. We definitely talked about Joseph Campbell before.
yeah, yeah,
Stuff that type of stuff. But I don't know. I think in this one, I think it was fun, kind of hearing at least your take on how you would approach certain scenarios for writing content. The
yeah,
one thing we're kind of out of time now, I guess, but I wanted to ask how you wanted to. I mean, I'm going back to Calamity Jane, like how you approached doing the episode 1 and all the episodes that you have written.
Yeah,
You know,
those,
that's
yeah, those are. I just basically wrote them like I wrote TV shows.
oh okay,
I
all
started
right.
with the beginning, a middle, and end, and then
Mm-hmm.
I kept expanding. And I think I've lost some of those outlines. I could probably find a few floating around somewhere, but yeah, those I actually sat down and like, okay, here's the beginning, here's the middle, here's the end.
Oh, okay. So you were more methodical with it.
Yeah, with the pilot, I mean, part of it came, the pilot especially came from originally, this is a deep cut for everybody. We were originally going to do Calamity Jane as a web comic.
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember that. We have a webcom. Maybe we'll
Yeah,
bust those
I,
out
I
and
did
talk
I did a
about
bunch of layouts for him. They
yeah.
were awful. The knowing where the panels were and knowing what the action
It
was
helped
that was what
you.
was important for you,
Yeah,
especially.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like my stick figure drawings inside of the
It's
panel
great.
layouts.
I have them someplace. I got to dig them out, but I still have them in a box.
Yeah,
They were
yeah.
they were fun. Yeah,
So
you were so into that when we first started. You were so itching, chomping at the bit. So like yeah, when you gave me shit drawings, I had no choice. I had to start doodling and stuff like that. It
yeah,
was pretty
no,
neat.
I mean, I still love the power of the panel. I mean, there's something to be said
Yeah,
about like really thoughtful design,
yep,
how you use the gutters between the panels,
yep,
how you leverage splash pages, that kind of stuff. I mean, it's I don't know.
yeah.
I love comic books at their best. Maybe are the most fun reading you can do. Right?
Yeah, I'm with you too. It's always a battle because yeah, I'm happy we're doing an animated. I mean, doing animation is great. I love either space,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
comic books, as far as their strength, it lets the viewer have a lot more power as to how much they want to linger on a page, how much they want to linger on one panel. They go
Hmm.
at their own pace. You you're not being dictated to how fast to go because
Yeah.
it's not
And
linear in the same way. Yeah,
yeah, and
so
it's really interesting how people will, depending on what they're looking for, they will. There's three things that people tend to focus on. They'll focus on the words, and then
yeah.
they'll read the words first, and then look at the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
pictures.
Yep.
Or people will look at the pictures and read the words. But then there's other people who scan the whole page and get a sense of what the flow of the is,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So they know kind of what the animation is, the animation in their mind is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's where all the animation happens in your mind in a comic book, and it happens in the gutters between the
Yeah.
panels.
Yeah. And that's really powerful.
Right. And so they'll go through that, they'll get a sense of the flow of the scene of the page, and then they'll go back and they'll read it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really interesting stuff. The psychology of reading comic books is really fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but in any case, so yeah, so we knew how
We
we wanted the opening scene to go because we had this idea for a big splash page of the desert at night, right? And we knew from it very early on that the main antagonists for the pilot episode were the Warhogs. And so my three sentence thing is, well, this was back when it was still Chaos Community. It wasn't, Calamity
yeah.
wasn't even in it. It was just
Mm-hmm.
chaos, right?
She wasn't even born yet.
Yeah, exactly. But it was something along the lines of a lone chameleon wanderer fights off a warhog in the desert night, right? That was sentence one. And then sentence two is our lone hero, winds up at a town following the trail of the warhogs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And discovers the next steps. And then the third sentence was Leon goes and defeats all of the warhogs. That was it, right?
Yeah.
And then you go back through and you go, okay, well, what does that look like, and how does that transition into him being in Dry Gulch Gorge? What happens in Dry Gulch Gorge that creates the impetus to go and fight the warhogs, and then what does fighting the warhogs look like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I approached the pilot, based on those two initial things. We wanted to see Leon in the desert at night, and we knew that the antagonists were going to be the warhogs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the genesis of the pilot script. Now, obviously, when we transitioned and we made the show about Calamity, we wanted to try to retain a lot of what we had already written for the original pilot, and mercifully, because it was a lot of introductions, we were able to pull that off. I mean, the first scene had to be rewritten a lot, but it
Yeah.
actually made it better because now there were two
Mm-hmm.
characters interacting, and
Yeah.
it wasn't, but yeah, I mean, so even what we just talked about, we still open in the desert at night. We still close with Calamity fighting off the warhogs. We still have her going into Drygulp Gorge. The motivation has changed, but the skeletal structure remained the same, and a lot of it had to do with the way that I approached the foundation of the script.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's the way I typically approach the Calamity Jane scripts, is just fall back on my TV writing training.
Yeah, and you got a system.
Mm-hmm.
So you definitely use a system for that. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool. Yeah, I mean, we did. I see. I kept this going over. See, I mean, I I want to have a little more fun with it. But yeah, but cool. Yeah, we can call it good for tonight. So yeah, I got my goal done, which is now
Okay.
we have the 3/4 back view of Clement being
Nice.
able to talk. So these are all now this is not a linear animation here, obviously, because things snap.
Sure.
But yeah, we're just here just to be able to snap to a different frame, whatever phonetic sound she's making. So we're good.
Excellent.
So the next thing is over here, this blank area. I'll make the happy version of them. But I might move on next week because I have what I need here.
That's great.
And,
Yeah. No, it
I'll
looks
do the happy.
excellent. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, it took a while, but yeah, sometimes you gotta meander a little bit. That's the thing. So
Yeah, you just
yeah,
gotta discover, gotta play.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, just the context of her by the body, yeah. So some weird graphic tearing going on, but that's just software.
Yeah, yeah.
But,
Well,
yeah,
cool.
cool.
All right. Well, that was another supersized episode. We're just making up for the weird absences that I'd had over the course of July.
Yeah, some bad luck, man.
Yeah, tell me
What,
about
what
it.
else can you What else can you do?
Just ride the wave and hope that it passes sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
But in any case, good stream, change of pace rather than geeky stuff. We actually did a little bit of an educational one this week.
Oh, we'll have plenty of geeky stuff for next week.
Well, I'm
Whatever,
sure we'll
so.
find it. I'm sure we'll find
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
All of the people out there hoping that I would talk about Monster Hunter more, I apologize. I assure you I'm still playing it. Maybe next week. I'll bore you with that instead. All right, well,
Cool.
as always, you can find us on calamityjane.rocks. It'll take you to our Patreon site. Please consider signing up and helping us make this silly cartoon. We don't post very often on Facebook, but we do post our live stream updates there, and occasionally if we have some announcements or something like that, Facebook is also a good place to look. And then we do a 3-tweet story every week on Twitter, so you can find us at Jane Salamander on Twitter. And yeah, I think that is, for the time being, the sum total of our social media presence. And what do the kids say? Don't forget to like and subscribe, right?
I guess that's what the kids say.
Am I cool now? Is YouTube going to pay me the fat stacks? Anyway, but please do consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss a single episode of our weekly stream. Otherwise,
yeah, I was gonna say, and if you happen to catch our stream and it's kind of setting up your geek or nerd senses about talking about pop culture with us, feel free to jump in and catch us live and jump in the chat.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. 9:30 East Coast, 6:30 West Coast every Monday night. So, or as many Monday nights in a row as we can get them. But yeah, otherwise that's everything for me. And stay safe out there, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody.